and I can launch the Client Connector portal from here by clicking on Client Connector, or from the Zscaler Internet Access admin interface from Policy Client Connector portal. So in the Client Connector portal, I can see all of my enrolled devices by device type, operating system and everything. If I go to enrolled devices, I can see all of the devices that are enrolled. If I want to sort them, I can look at a device information, I can remove it or quarantine it and prevent it accessing internet access and private access. And therefore I can see in here all the different client connector versions and versions of digital experience that are running. I see information about the device that has been collected and the hardware fingerprint and MAC address of the network interface, and I can see the status of the Zscaler Zero Trust services, internet access, private access and digital experience, and I can understand information about the configuration and those one-time passwords that if I want to provide to the user to sign out. I can click Force Remove, which forcibly invalidates all of those security keys from the device and prevents access to the Zero Trust exchange. If I come across to administration first, I can see the different versions of Zscaler Client Connector that will be installed. I can see the new releases that have been provided, and I can go ahead and enable that build if I want to deploy it to the different versions of the operating systems. So under personal computers, I can now see the latest version that's available. I can download the EXEs for 32-bit and the MSI for 32-bit, as well as the EXE and MSI for 64-bit operating systems. If I download the MSI, I can apply a transform to build a custom installer that can be pushed out, or I can run the EXEs with the installer options. I can take Mac OS, I have again different versions. I can download the app or the PKG file, download the app, I can package it up myself with my installer options, and I can see the iOS and Android. Obviously, iOS needs to come from the App Store. We're going to start with trusted network and what defines a trusted network. So I can add a new trusted network, or I can edit an existing one. So here I've defined my data center as having a specific DNS server, 192.168.1.2, the search domain, which is provided by DHCP, and I have a host name which resolves router.welshgeek.net to this IP address. And I can say I want any of those to be true, or I want them all to be true. And if they all match, then I'm going to be defined as being in the data center. Alternatively, I could define different branches, and any of these conditions can make me on a trusted network. Within Client Connector, I have a number of options available in terms of auto population of the IDP configuration and auto enrollment, as well as auto re-authentication for Zscaler private access when re-authentication triggers. I'm going to make sure that I collect root information and other issues should they occur within the logs, and I define how I'm going to fail open if the internet access is unavailable. So if captive portal is detected, then I want to disable the security for a certain amount of time to enable the user to sign into the captive portal. I could set this to 0 and ensure that we never disable the client when a captive portal, meaning that users cannot interface with captive portals for a security reason. And then if the public service edge is not available, or those tunnels are not available, then I want to disable internet access entirely, which basically locks the machine down. So if I can't access the internet, or I don't want to interact with captive portals, the machine is locked down until the user goes onto a network or tethers to a device that provides internet security, tethers to a device that provides internet access and provides connectivity to the Zero Trust exchange. I have user privacy or company privacy, which has the controls of what is collected on the device. So I might want to prevent the user from doing packet captures. I might want to restrict location information from Zscaler Digital Experience for user privacy. I might want to restrict that hostname information or owner information from the device, and I can control that here. Endpoint integration means that I can control that client connector listening port for my tunnel with local proxy if I want to do that, and ensure that this configuration is pushed into Firefox as well. And then when we define VPNs, if there's a VPN configured on the endpoint as well, how should I identify those adapters when they're pushed on the device? Device cleanup, how many devices is a user allowed to enroll against? We can have up to 16 devices per user, force remove inactive devices after a certain amount of time, and permanently delete devices from the enrolled devices screen after we haven't seen them for 180 days. And then in advanced configuration, I'm going to control the upload of those custom root certificates and how group information is synchronized from Zscaler Internet Access, and that does that periodically. Periodically, the mobile portal will synchronize groups from Zscaler Internet Access portal, but it will also synchronize groups dynamically during an authentication round. So when the user authenticates using SAML, the user group information is provided to Zscaler Internet Access as well as to the mobile portal in the same time. Or if groups are pushed through SCIM to the Internet Access platform, then they are pushed to mobile portal as well. I can control service entitlement based on group membership for digital experience and Zscaler private access. I can say which groups of users, again, through the group information, through the authentication to Zscaler Internet Access, I could restrict access to Zscaler private access and restrict access to digital experience based on group as well. If I want to control authentication based on user agent, I can do that here. And this is the user agent that the Zscaler client will present to services when it needs to authenticate to them. Under device posture, I can list my posture profiles. So here I have my root certificate authority, and if this certificate is present on Windows or Mac, then I will say the device has passed this posture profile. I can look for registry keys, I can look for files, I can check if the firewall is running. I can have a client certificate check, and I'm going to look for whether or not the certificate has an exportable or non-exportable private key, and I will provide a certificate revocation list check against the CRL in the certificate and against the certificate authority and validate that certificate through its chain of trust. All of these device postures enable me to look at whether the device is corporately owned, corporately managed device where it has firewalls, registry entries, files, and certificates, as well as the security of the device if it has the firewall running, endpoint posture, and everything else running. I can also take device posture from the SAML IDP, which might return that in SAML attributes that I can apply in policy also. Under application bypass, we have some predefined rules here for Microsoft Teams, what UDP and TCP ports it runs on, and the IP ranges. I can use those in my app profile. So see the administration tab as the definitions that we're going to use and collect together in the app profile that ends up getting applied to the device. So we're going to look at the forwarding profile, and the forwarding profile makes a decision at the endpoint what pack file configurations get pushed into the browser as the way that the browser or the operating system will treat proxy connections. So Let's take a look at adding a forwarding profile and what options I have. So the first one is I can define some trusted network criteria here, or I can reuse those predefined trusted networks. So I can add my condition, and I can say all predefined trusted networks apply to here, or I select specific ones that I want to apply to this forwarding profile. I select them both and it defaults to all. When I'm evaluating those trusted network criteria, do I do it for all default route adapters? What should I contest with environments where I have a VPN on a split network? So should I apply it to the default adapter, or should I apply it to the VPN adapter? Or should I entirely skip those trusted network criteria for the VPN adapter? Again, these will all be specific based on your deployment and your VPN, but on a zero trust for users, we're going to be using Zscaler Internet Access, Zscaler Private Access, and Zscaler Digital Experience, so none of the VPN information will apply. Now, within Windows devices, we can make a tunnel decision of whether we're doing route-based or packet filter-based. On Mac, it will always be route-based based on the current versions of Zscaler Client Connector. So let's configure packet filter-based for Windows, and we're going to make a decision to use tunnel mode. But let's also look at the other options available. If I select none, then all we're going to configure is a system proxy setting, and that might be to enforce automatically detect settings, so it'll send a WPAD lookup, a specific pack file, which might be the on-premise proxy server pack file, specify a proxy server itself with a port, or tell it to execute a GPO update where it'll go and get group policy through ZPA, for example, and that group policy will set a browser configuration. But of course, with Zscaler for Users, we're not going to be setting system proxy settings or enforcing a proxy setting. What we're going to be doing is using tunnel mode. One consideration is tunnel with local proxy. And tunnel with local proxy uses the loopback adapter that sits within Zscaler client and explicitly tunnels traffic to that from the browser. So the browser has a pack file configuration, and that pack file configuration says anything going to the internet should talk to 127.0.0.1, which is the Zscaler client connector on port 9000, and because it's explicitly proxied, this is the natural migration from an explicit proxy on the network with Zscaler client. We can combine all of these together with system proxies and tunnel mode, but I don't want to. This is a best practices deployment with zTunnel 2.0. So with zTunnel 2.0, I'm going to say I want to use DTLS tunnel. I'm going to give it 5 seconds to time out. So if my UDP response hasn't come back within 5 seconds from the Zscaler Zero Trust Exchange, then I'm going to fall back to a TLS connection. And if my TLS connection has timed out after 5 seconds as well, then I'm going to make some other decisions on what I'm going to do. My other decisions might be to bypass or redirect traffic. I can control my MTU for the Zscaler adapter if there are problems with traffic traversal through my network. Okay, so I've configured my zTunnel 2.0 transport settings. I can make a decision what I want to do with IPv6. I'd probably say we should drop IPv6 and force all traffic on IPv4 through the tunnels. And I could make decisions about these proxy settings if I still need some traffic to go to specific proxies. An example might be that I have a proxy in my environment advertised through ZPA that I need to connect to access certain resources. So I might still have a proxy configuration. But in most cases, the proxy, as in what gets set in the browser, will be set to never, or we're going to enforce a specific proxy setting which is empty. The VPN trusted network is based on those trusted network profiles. So I'm going to say it's the same as on trusted network. I want to tunnel everything, and off trusted network, I want to tunnel all traffic as well. And then I make a decision for ZPA. Do I want ZPA to be on or off based on my different trusted network criteria? So I want ZPA and ZIA to be in tunnel mode all of the time. So if we look at the existing configurations I might have, I've got my tunnel mode for Windows, I've got my tunnel mode for OS X, OS X being the root mode tunnel. And I've also got a configuration here for tunnel with local proxy as a demonstration. So the tunnel with local proxy says I want to enforce this pack file, which is set in my Zscaler Internet Access policy. This is my forwarding pack file that's going to get pushed to the browser, and it's going to be used on all networks. That profile pack is under Administration, Hosted Pack Files. And so I can see my forwarding pack file here, and we can edit it, and a pack file has some very basic constructs. It says, if it is a plain host name, so it's not fully qualified, I want to send it direct and allow the workstation to make a decision to add domain suffixes, create a fully qualified distinguished name, resolve it, and route it. So that should go through ZPA. I can also do the same, that if the domain on the URL is mywelshgeek.net, I can then say, let's resolve it. And if it resolves to a 164 address, which is the ZPA address range, I want that to go direct as well. And anything else I want to send through the Zscaler local proxy running on the client. So let's take a look at how that might look on a Windows device. So I can come to my app profiles. So let's go ahead and add a Windows policy. We're going to call it tunnel with local proxy. We're going to put it as rule number 1 and set it to enable. And we're going to apply it to all users and all groups. And we need to set an application pack URL. So the application pack URL is http pack.zscaler2.net, welshgeek.net, app.pack. And that application pack file is referenced here within my administration URL. And if I edit it, it's making a definition of what should come to Zscaler from the application. So once Zscaler Client Connector has intercepted traffic. So this is very simple. It says send all traffic to the primary node and to the backup node. So I have my application pack file. I'm going to install the Zscaler root certificate for SSL inspection and my private certificate. And I'm going to select that tunnel with local proxy configuration. And I'm going to tell it to override the WPAD that it might get from group policy object. Because we're using tunnel with local proxy, I'm going to disable that local loopback restriction. I'm going to tell it to restart the WinHTTP service so that the operating system understands that there's been a change in the proxy configuration, and that's about it. There are some other options here around SCCM I'm not going to go into, and the ztunnel 2.0 configuration says well, everything that's going to be bypassed are the RFC 1918 ranges at the network level, and those inclusions being 0000/0. So I'm going to click Save. Okay, so I have my profile now created called TWLP, Tunnel with Local Proxy. And so I'm going to come across to my Windows device. And you can see I've got Zscaler Client Connector running here. So we're going to start with logging in. And it's going to ask me to log in with a credential, and it's going to ask me which cloud I'm on, Zscaler 2, and it'll go ahead and authenticate me against my SAML IDP. So it's going to prompt me for multi-factor authentication, and now I'm enrolled. And so I can open Zscaler Client Connector here, and we can see it's detected I'm on the trusted network. And we can see that it's applied this tunnel with local proxy configuration. So let's take a look in the browser as to what it's done. And you can see it's set the pack file to be this local pack file, which it's translated from what it's downloaded in the cloud. And so because I have this pack file configuration, let's take a look. You can see it's taken that pack file we defined, and it's replaced that variable with that loopback address on port 9000. And we have these bypasses in here for my domains, so I will automatically detect that https dc3 welshgeek.net is in the intranet zone, and therefore I will do Kerberos authentication towards it.